Thanks for joining Orchid's September webinar on Accounting Magic Part 2. In last month's webinar, we demonstrated how to use inter-entity transactions to balance loan account entries automatically and document management link to add and display supporting documentation in Sage 300 across companies. Today, we focus on document management link and inter-entity trade to streamline transaction flows and sharing documents across multiple entities who trade with each other rather than just have loan accounts. My name is Natalie from Orchid, and today I'm joined by Anne from Orchid as well, that most of you know, as well as Nancy and Rob from Robert Lavery and Associates, who have been distributing Orchid products in the Americas for the last 20 years. So without further ado, we'll start the presentation, which is about 35 minutes, and then we will have time for questions. So you can put in your questions as you're watching the presentation, and we will get back to them at the end of the presentation. In Accounting Magic Part 2, we focus on streamlining transaction flows and sharing documents to manage multiple entities with ease. As we discussed in our recent webinar, the average Sage 300 site has 8 entities, and the largest manages over 800 entities in Sage 300. When Sage recently updated their product positioning checklist for business management solutions, one of the Sage 300 main benefits they chose to highlight was its ability to manage complex finances for multiple companies. Sage 300 in itself offers many advantages for companies running multiple entities, and Orchid products make the management even easier. This explains why over 1,000 Sage 300 sites use the inter-entity suite, inter-entity transactions, to keep entities in balance at all times and generate offsetting loan account entries automatically, and inter-entity trade to create reciprocal buy and sell documents automatically. The focus of today's presentation is on using inter-entity trade and document management link to add and view documents across multiple companies while you're creating your order entry and purchasing transactions. In today's presentation, Nancy looks at how document management link supports better collaboration in a company with multiple entities with an easy setup, and how we can attach documents in order entry and view them in related purchase order transactions and in order entry across multiple companies. Rob will then give us a detailed presentation on how to create PO and order entry transactions automatically across multiple entities between a distribution company and a manufacturing company using inter-entity trade, and how this is supported by document management link. Finally, Anne will present a scenario using the Sage 300 web screens to create reciprocal documents in OE and PO. This demonstrates that inter-entity works with the Sage 300 web screens. You need to configure inter-entity trade in the classic desktop screens, but its automations work when using the web screens. Over to you, Nancy.
Thanks very much, Natalie. So before we jump into inter-entity trade and Rob shows you that module in some detail, we thought we'd show you an overview of document management link and how it can be used with inter-entity trade. So in a few minutes, Rob's going to show you the inter-entity trade module, and he's going to be creating an order in order entry from his source company and automatically creating a purchase order in the target company. So we've done some configuration around order entry and want to illustrate that you can do the configuration once and have documents viewed not only within an individual company, but across companies as well. So in order entry, I've got my order number 1 that has been created, and this is the order that will ultimately create a purchase order in my target company. So with Document Management Link, we're configuring around a field on the screen, and then based on the value in that field, it knows which documents to show us. So in my case, I've done my configuration using network folders. So I'm storing documents outside of Sage 300 in my network folders, and I'm able to view the documents from within Sage 300. So we're not affecting your Sage database at all, and we're linking the documents to the fields on the screen. So in the first instance, I'm seeing the documents that I have stored around my order number 1. And then I've also done a configuration around my customer number. So this is around the customer number field, and I'm able to see the documents that I have stored against my customer number. And so how someone can add a document when they're doing an entry in Sage 300, if I hover over the Document Management Link window, you'll see this Add button appear. And I can click on that button and go out anywhere in my environment to find a document that I want to link, click on that document, drag it and drop it over the Document Management Link window, and it's going to refile that document into the folder system we've created for Document Management Link. So in this case, that document will now be stored under my customer 1200. I've also done a configuration around the purchase order so I can see any backup related to the purchase order in this Orchid Systems company. And I'm storing some item images so I can view images around my items. And that's to show that you can link documents to the entry grid fields as well. So the first example is the order number, the purchase order number, the customer number. I'm linking all of those to what we call the header fields on the screen. But you can also link to the entry grid, as I've done here around the item images. And then I've also done a configuration around the price list. And I did this configuration because I wanted to also highlight for you, you can get creative with your configuration of Document Management Link. So in this particular case, I'm entering an order, and this CTPR is the price list being used for this particular item. But I wanted to also show you that Document Management Link will also work around the finders. So in the case of this price list, I could easily click on a different price list, and I can view a price list as it relates to a different price code. So just to give you, some additional ideas on how you can do configuration and maximize the features the Document Management Link will be adding for you. So in the scenario that Rob's going to be showing you with Interentity Trade, that order is now going to create a purchase order. So if I close out of this company and we'll go into my Orc Inc. 2 company, and we go to the purchase order entry screen. So if you can imagine, Interentity is going to create this entry for us. And let's just call up PO number 31. And this would be effectively the transaction that Interentity Trade is going to create. And what we're doing in this case is we're passing the original order number into the reference field in the target company. So I'm able to view the documents related to that order number here in this original sales order box. So I linked these documents in my source company when I created the order, but because we're passing the order number into the reference field in the target company, I'm able to view those documents. So, we typically explain how you can configure around a field in a company and view those documents against multiple screens. This is illustrating for you that you can store documents once and view those documents across multiple companies as well. And then on this screen, similar to what I was doing in order entry for purchase orders, I'm linking documents to my vendor number. I'm also linking to the purchase order in this particular company, as well as the item images that we saw against the order entry in my Orchid Systems company. Now, what I've done around this vendor number, we sometimes have clients that have a lot of documents that are going to be stored, in this case, around vendor number. And what I've done here is given you another idea where you can start to filter the contents that you're viewing for a particular folder. So in this case, what I've done is I've created a subfolder for my year 2020. So, you know, you have ways that you can make things easier for users and just be a little bit creative. Whether that's using the description or reference field to store information that's not natively available on that screen, or as I've done in this case, where I'm doing an extra filter based on the year. So I can easily just view the documents that relate to this current year. And then if I need to, I can go into the archive for previous years just by clicking. The other thing I want to mention is, you know, you can easily navigate to the folder system that's been created by Document Management Link. On this button at the top, when I click on that, it's going to show me all of the folders that are linked to this particular screen. And I can just click and go out to any of those folders. So in this case, my file path is my C drive, Orchid, documents. And then for my AP documents, I'm storing by vendor. And in this case, I did a filter based on the calendar year. So I've, you know, separated my documents for 2020. So under AP documents, you can see the list of the vendor folders that I have here. You know, once you get this folder hierarchy in place, Document Management Link will build this out for you automatically. So in this example, if I were to store a document for a new vendor, and that vendor does not have a folder, Document Management Link can create that folder and then file the document. And that would hold true for any of the configurations. You know, if I put in an item number here that does not have a folder, then it will do the same thing. It will create a new folder for the item. And if we can go out and have a look at our item folders here, so I can see all of the different items that I have folders for. So those are some ideas around the purchase order entry. And just to show you that those documents are viewable from multiple screens. So I could then call up the receipt as it relates to that order. And again, we're passing that order number into the receipt reference field. So I'm still able to see those original documents as it related to the original order. And also on the invoice entry screen, I can see those same documents when I do the entry of the invoice. So these are just some additional ideas around how you can utilize Document Management Link to store and view documents. And in this particular instance, we're showing you how you can utilize Document Management Link with interentity trade. So with that, I will pass it over to Rob to show you interentity trade.
This presentation reviews the functionality of the interentity trade module from Orchid Systems. As you may be familiar, interentity transactions is the module where you process intercompany entries through loan accounts that you create through the linked accounts, the due to, due from loan accounts that we process in the general ledger. This supports expense allocations, revenue allocations, and also cash management entries where you wish to receive money on behalf of another company or make payments on behalf of another company, or manage the loan of cash between related party entities. And these are all cleared through loan accounts in the general ledger. But what happens when you want to buy and sell between related parties? This is where the interentity trade module comes in. Using interentity trade, we have the ability to create an AP invoice that creates an AR invoice in the same or a different Sage 300 company database, or vice versa. We can create an AR invoice, which then creates an AP invoice in the same or a different Sage 300 company. You can also process AP credits to AR credits and vice versa, or AP payments to AR receipts and vice versa. So it's possible to create AR to AP subledger-based transactions, so you actually have invoices that you can settle through payment transactions, as opposed to creating loan account entries that are settled by transferring money or just offsetting due to and due from accounts across one or multiple entities. In today's presentation, we want to highlight for you the use of OE trade to PO trade. This is where we can create an OE order that creates a purchase order in the same or different Sage 300 company databases. And all the other related transactions, such as OE shipment to PO receipt, or OE invoice to PO invoice. And this can be done in either direction. And in fact, as we create the relationship between these different companies or entities, you have the ability to not only go in one direction, OE to PO, but you can flag this relationship as being bidirectional. So what we find in practice is that many companies have a selling company and a manufacturing company. So what they do is they create a sales order in the source company to the ultimate end consumer, and the generation of that OE sales order creates a purchase order in the same company to buy the goods from the manufacturing company. And that PO, once it's created, then creates a sales order back to the source company for selling those goods to the company that is ultimately selling to the end consumer. So this is what we call an OE to PO to OE trade transaction. And this can be facilitated by creating the OE to PO relationship. And you notice that in this case, I'm creating the purchase order in the same company database. So when I make the sales transaction, it creates a purchase order in the same company to the company I want to buy the goods from. And then I can turn around and say that that PO document that's created is going to move over to the target company or the manufacturing company in this example. And that PO document will create the sales order document in Orc Inc. 2, which is a sales order back to Entity 1 or Orc Limited in this case. The system also allows us to use category overrides because some companies upon consolidation need to eliminate the intercompany profits. We can set up a special IC category to capture all of the intercompany profits on intercompany-based sales. You could also use a location override so that inventory that's being sold between related parties is also tracked through a different location. And you can also have a separate price list. Notice that you also have a cost multiplier to support transfer pricing, either at cost or at a markup. And then you can also override the transaction line tax so that you can determine which tax jurisdiction you would like to apply to these transactions. So once we have these related party trading partners set up as a relationship within the OEPO trade setup, we're now able to start creating transactions for purchase and sales in the scenario where you want to move inventory or drop ship inventory from the manufacturing company to the end consumer, but have the sale actually recorded in the first company, in this case, Orc Limited. So to set up the transaction, we're going to create a sales order in Orc Limited to our famous customer, Mr. Ronald Black. And we're going to use the ship via, which is just highlighting the fact that we can create a sales order and only certain lines are needing to be purchased from our related party. And what you see on the right-hand side is the document management link solution, which means I can also record a copy of the sales order and use that as a supporting document for the transaction audit trail. So I'm going to create a sales order in Orc Limited to Mr. Ronald Black. The description is going to be an intercompany sale and purchase. And this description can be part of what we call the integration settings that allows us to add to the audit trail information between the companies. So I'm going to create a ship via code for an inventory item, and I'm just going to choose the fluorescent desk lamp. And I'm going to have it be sold out of location 1. And let's say the order quantity is 10. And then I'll do a second line item. And this will be the item 105, which is the fluorescent lamp. And you notice the picture of the item coming up. That's Orchid Notes. And let's say this is an order of 5. Now, when I post this order, it's going to create the sales order in this company, which will then create a purchase order in this company over to Orc Inc. 2. And then it will go over to the Orc Inc. 2 database, and it will create a sales order in Orc Limited 2 back to Orc Limited. Now, I wanted to use the ship via code E2, which is the way that we're specifying that this is a transaction that needs to be recorded as an intercompany sale. So it would be possible to use the ship via code on a multi-line sales order where just some of these items were recorded as part of the intercompany sale and others were being replenished through the inventory in the company that's creating this initial sales order. So you can see that the description is entity 2, which identifies which entity that I want to buy from. So when I post the transaction, I get a request to approve because of the credit limit. And then I'm able to go ahead and post this sales order in Orc Limited, which will then create the purchase order in Orc Limited, which we'll show you, and then go over to create the sales order in Orc Inc. 2. So notice that we have order 89 created in Orc Inc. 2 against PO 52, and PO 52 was created in Orc Limited for order 119, which is what we'll see created right here. So there's order 119. That created purchase order 52 in this company, which then created the sales order in Orc Inc. 2. So now we come to the purchase order entry here in Orc Limited, and you can see that PO52 has been created in the same company off of the sales order 119, which was our original sales order. You can see that the description, intercompany sale and purchase, has been added. The company that the original sales order came from, and in this case, we've also added the user name. This is the PO that's created now to buy these items from Orc Inc. 2 in order to fulfill the sales order that we created to Mr. Ronald Black. Now we move over to Orc Inc. 2, and we see our sales order that has been created selling the goods back to Orc Limited. When we open up the order entry screen, we should see the reference to the original sales order. So here is order 89. And if I had added a document attachment, the original sales order 119 from Orc Limited would be shown in document management link. And I've got the information about the original sales order, the reference field, and the PO that's associated in Orc Limited to this sales order here in Orc Inc. 2. And again, the description, intercompany sale and purchase, the original sales order from Orc Limited, and the user who set that up. Now, this has got the two items, the quantity of 10 and 5. But if for some reason I needed to modify the order, and let's say the customer called, said they actually want 12, I could edit the order in Orc Inc. 2 or the PO in Orc Limited, and it will modify the quantity on all three documents automatically. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and post the fact that we've modified this order, and that will update the PO to a quantity of 12 for the first line item on the original PO 52, and also update the order 119 in Orc Limited as well. So now against this order in Orc Inc. 2, I want to ship all, and then I want to also create the invoice. And both the shipment and the invoice will be created here in order entry in Orc Inc. 2, which will then create the PO receipt and PO invoice in Orc Limited, which will create the shipment and OE invoice to the customer in Orc Limited. So now you see that the OE shipment 101 has created a PO receipt 122 in Orc Limited. And we've also created against that PO receipt an OE shipment 77 in Orc Limited. You also notice that OE invoice 90 has been created in Orc Limited for PO invoice 74, and that PO invoice 74 has created a sales invoice 74 in Orc Limited as well. And now we'll close out of this order here in Orc Inc. 2 and go back to Orc Limited to show you the transactions that resulted. So we start with the purchase order that was created here in Orc Limited off the original sales order. If you remember, that was PO 52. Now we can see receipt 122 has been created. If we move to the invoice entry, we will see that the invoice 74 was created against receipt 122. And I have a different series of invoice numbers here, so I need to go backwards to find that invoice number 74, which is right here. Notice a couple of things here. We have the original PO 52, the original sales order 119, the receipt 122, and the invoice 74 have all been created. And we updated the quantity from 10 to 12 on the sales order within Orc Inc. 2. That has now been updated for the quantity on the PO receipt and invoice here in Orc Limited. And now within order entry, we see that we have an invoice 74 that will be recorded against the shipment and the original order entry 119. So there's the reference to the PO invoice 74 and the order 119 against those items with the quantity of 12. So that amendment flowed all the way through the order entry to PO to OE, and we have now fulfilled the transaction on both companies without rekeying the information and having all of the documents prepared and produced automatically for us based on the original sales order. That's how inter-entity trade streamlines the transaction details for you quickly and easily. If you have any questions about this, we invite you to send those questions, and thank you so much for your time and attention today.
And just as Rob used the classic desktop to enter the OE sales order against Mr. Ronald Black, we can use the web screens as well. This is because inter-entity transactions and inter-entity trade work at the view level. And so the automation of the additional documents is all done at the view level. So entering a sales order against Ronald Black, using the same order description and using the same quantities, we're going to make the ship via E2 for both lines. And when the order is posted, the additional documents, the purchase order in Orc Limited is created and the sales order in Orc Inc. 2 is created. And the original sales order number is 112. Having a look at the purchase order, PO61 is created, and you can see the purchase order description and the reference that it came from order 122. And connecting to Orc Inc. 2, in order entry, we can see the sales order that was automatically created. And again, we see the purchase order number, the original description, the user and the company it came from, and the reference being the original sales order number in Orc Ltd. And if we go ahead and change the quantity to 12, the purchase order and sales order in Orc Limited will be updated. And now if we go ahead and ship and invoice this sales order, the shipment and invoice will be created in Orc Inc. 2, and the PO will be receipted and invoiced in Orc Limited, and the original sales order to Ronald Black will be shipped and invoiced. So if we go back to Orc Limited, in PO, we can see the original purchase order is receipted. The receipt number is 118. And the quantity ordered has been updated to 12. And looking at the purchase invoice, we can see invoice 75 was for the original sales order 122. And the quantity invoiced is 12. and back against the original sales order for Ronald Black, we can see shipment 102 was created and invoice 92 was created.
Thanks, Nancy, Rob, and Anne, for your magical and creative presentations. We've seen how Document Management Link can be used to share documents across processes and across companies in the ordering and purchase order processes. Document is linked once to the original order in order entry and can be viewed when working with the reciprocal purchase order, PO receipt, and PO invoices in separate companies or in the same companies. We've also demonstrated how inter-entity trade helps you create reciprocal transactions in OE and PO automatically based on highly configurable rules. The example we looked at involved a distribution company and a manufacturing entity. We enter an OE order, a sales order, in the distribution company, and inter-entity trade automatically creates the related PO for the manufacturing vendor in the distribution company, as well as an order, a sales order, in the manufacturing company. In the manufacturing company, we then ship and invoice the OE order, which automatically receipts and invoices the purchase order and ships and invoice the sales order in the distribution company. This is how we configured our example. We also demonstrated that you can enter the sales documents once and view them in the related transactions in the same company or across companies. Transactions can be entered on the Sage 300 desktop screen as well as the web screens. You can refer to the Orchid website for a detailed demonstration of Document Management Link and inter-entity trade and see the different ways that you can configure the modules to suit your requirements. Thanks for your time, and for more information, go to the Orchid website. Thank you. So we now have time for questions on the presentation on inter-entity trade, Document Management Link, or other burning questions you may have for us. And we'll start with the first question is, can we also use documents, can we create the documents automatically when we enter the order or the purchase order? Or do we have to just drag them into the tray? Do you want to answer that, Anne?
Sure. So using Extender, you can automate the creation of documents. For example, you could automate the purchase order creation of the PDF when the PO is posted, or when an invoice is created, you can PDF the invoice automatically using a custom script with Extender. So in the case where you want to save the order confirmation to make it available in another company, when the order is initially posted, it could automatically be PDF'd and filed away in the appropriate Document Management Link folder. So Extender is able to look at the Document Management Link configuration, replace the order number and the customer number in the path, if that's the way you're storing it, or in the case of the purchase order, you need the vendor number replaced and you need to name the document the same as the purchase order number. So Extender is able to do that and then file it away for Document Management Link. And then your Document Management Link configuration in either company would then, and either company, any screen within either company that contains that information can be configured to show the documents.
Thank you. Second question is, can you run Document Management Link on the web screens?
So the answer to that is not yet. So we released EFT, the initial transaction-oriented screens, in late May this year. And the next module we moved on to is Document Management Link. So we've made good progress on that, but we had to temporarily pause our development on document management link for web screens while we do our version 2022 release, compatibility release, because that was released by Sage on August the 23rd. So this is well down the track now. We're testing now and should be releasing all the modules in the next 6 weeks or so, hopefully a little earlier, and then starting off with EFT. And then we'll go back to document management link for web screens. So we don't have an ETA, but it is top of our list.
Thank you. So stay tuned to our next messages and newsletters. Next question is just to confirm the ship via field on the detail line is what is used to determine whether the order PO will be created in both companies. This is actually based on your configuration in inter-entity trade. So in the example in the presentation, we used ship via. You can configure account to account or account to ship via. Do you want to add anything to that, Anne?
Yes, when you're dealing with ship via, maybe Natalie, you just want to make me presenter?
There you go.
Can you see my Sage screen?
I can, so hopefully everyone else can.
Hopefully. So in the configuration for OEPO trade, you set up your partner relationships, and this is what tells us that it's whether it's a ship via to account or account to account. But in this case, this ship via to account, so that is why it's triggering off the ship via E2. So yes, any order document with the ship via of E2 on the detail line will create a purchase order to vendor 9002. So this means that, as Rob explained, you could have 3 lines on your sales order, and it could have E2 on line 1 and line 3. So only those 2 items would go on the PO. Similarly, you could have a different configured ship via on line 2. So a single sales order could create multiple purchase orders if that's what you need to do. Which is different. And for order entry, just to finish answering the question, for order entry, it is taking the ship via on the detail. Now, when you come to purchase orders, you only have one ship via on the header. So if you're going to do a purchase order to a sales order document using ship via, then you need to have the ship via on the header, and all the lines will go onto the associated order document. So what was the other part I was going to answer to that? Okay, so that's your ship via to account relationship, which is different to your account to account relationship. So account to account relationship, we're saying this vendor in this case, because it's a PO document to an OE document. So this vendor is going to map to Orchid 2, which is a separate company, to that customer. So all the lines on the PO will go through to the sales order in Orchid 2. So account to account, all the lines go on to the target document, but ship via to account, only those order details will go, which have got that same ship via, will go onto the configured vendor's PO.
Thank you. Next question, is there a way to go from OE to AP for if the target company doesn't use PO?
So the way you would configure that, so in Orc Limited, you would configure not OE to PO, you would configure trade on an APAR level. So even though your PO invoice was posted in, or your sales invoice was posted in OE, it will eventually make its way to AR and AP. So PO2 will go up to AP, and OE will go up to AR. And so instead of configuring OEPO and you're dealing with items, you would configure just AP to AR. So when the day end is run and when your AR invoice, or in this case, your AP invoice arrives, any AP invoice against vendor 9002 is going to go to Orchid 2 against customer 9001. So yes, you can have a mixture of OEPO in one database and AR/AP in the other database, but then you would only configure at an AP/AR level, not at an OEPO level.
Hope that answers your question. If you have other specific questions for a scenario you're trying to configure for a prospect or a client, as you know, you can contact us or contact Rob, and we'll help you configure it for your specific requirements.